So we tell ourselves we'll do it when I'm safer, we'll do it after we're established. You can't put it off. You can't tell yourself like when I'm more established, when it's safer, when it's more proven, because that's when you miss your moment. I am here at Cerro Gordo, an abandoned mining town in the mountains of California that was once the most valuable silver mine in the United States. You might have seen Brent Underwood's amazing videos about Cerro Gordo, the Ghost Town Living channel. I'm actually an investor in Cerro Gordo. I've known Brent since he started as my intern. It's amazing to see him that he literally owns a town. He's more than the mayor. He's like the baron who owns this incredible ghost town. And he's turned it into this awesome sort of story, this live story he's telling in his YouTube videos. I want to go around, I want to show you this awesome place, but I also want to connect it to ancient philosophy, not just because there were mines in Greece and Rome, but more because of the Stoic endurance of the people who lived here, and then also because of the things they did and the factors that motivate them. They provide a lot of fascinating lessons that both illustrate Stoic principles and then remind us of why there are certain Stoic principles, because if you don't follow them, you get into trouble. So I'm excited to show you this incredible place and teach you some Stoic lessons along the way. One of my absolute favorite quotes from Seneca, he says, "The whole world is a temple to the gods." When you look out at the insane beauty, it's hard not to be struck by that, just how obscenely beautiful the world is. Actually, one of my favorite Marcus Aurelius passages is when he's sort of talking about the ordinary beauty of life in Meditations. He talks about nature's inadvertence, the way that bread cracks open or olives fall ripe from the tree, or the way that grain bends low under its own weight. You look even like this scrub brush growing out of the side of a cliff face. You look at the mountains, the way they frame the city. It's just incredible. You have to cultivate that eye to appreciate it, to see it, to soak it in. You can't be too busy, you can't be too preoccupied, you can't be too obsessed with yourself not to see it. I mean, even just look how insanely beautiful the road up to Cerro Gordo is, just carved out of the face of the mountain. On the bookshelf here at Cerro Gordo, I found one of my absolute favorite books, Toto-chan, The Little Girl at the Window. But there's a little memento mori story that I think about every time I touch or think about this book, which I just reread a couple years ago, and we actually sell my bookstore, The Painted Porch. The person who recommended that book to me was my friend, Seth Roberts. And a couple years ago, Seth sent me an email on a Friday. I saw it, I started to read it, then I marked it as unread, and I said, I'm gonna get to it on Monday. I was editing an article or something he was writing, and I said, I'll do it Monday. But that Sunday, he dropped dead of a heart attack on a hike. It's obviously tragic that he's gone, but the final lesson I took from that was this idea of memento mori, which the Stoics talk about, which is that you can't take people or life for granted. You never know. You never know how long you get with someone. You never know if you'll get another chance to respond to that email. And I think about that email all the time. I could have responded. I could have just said hello. We would have connected one last time before he died. And this is a great book. You should definitely read it. It's a beautiful book. But I hope that memento mori reminder sticks with you as well. Hobbes famously said that life is nasty, brutish, and short. And Aristotle said something pretty similar about the lives of slaves back in ancient Greece. And you can get some sort of desolate, dark summations of human existence from Marcus Aurelius too. But you think about the lives of these miners. You know, they're making $4 a day, maybe. They're literally carving out rock piece by piece, bucket by bucket, just getting destroyed. Almost none of them ever actually strike it rich. In this Union mine up here, there was a cave-in that killed up to like 200 miners, or something like that. They're just stuck there. They never got out. And who remembers them? To me, the point isn't to be dark and morbid, although, you know, we're all fragile and mortal today. To me, the lesson is like, we should be immensely grateful for the privileges and advantages that we have in the modern world. We're so lucky. I'm here at Cerro Gordo, and I'm standing on top of a 70-foot mound. The mounds, the stuff that comes out of a mine, are called tailings. So this hoist house here, tiny cage, every day running 24/7 would bring up rocks, right? All the excess that they're trying to get out of the mine. Not even just the ore, but the excess. So these tailing piles, that's 70 feet, multiple hills of millions of pounds of rock, which reminds me of two great Stoic quotes. One, Marcus Aurelius says, "We assemble our life action by action. No one can stop you from that." The idea that you're going to build a 70-foot pile of refuse is insane. But how do you do it? You do it one ore cart at a time, one trip from the hoist at a time. And then my other favorite quote, this is actually from Zeno, the founder of Stoicism. He says, well-being is realized by small steps, but it's no small thing, right? Each one of these, just a tiny little load of rocks, it itself is small, but cumulatively it's enormous. Whereas Washington's favorite expression was, many mickles make a muckle, many loads make a giant mountain. One of the things I think about when I come to a place like this is like, how did the people live? Like, how did they endure the adversity and the difficulty in the inhospitable weather? And the answer is they dealt with it one day at a time. They dealt with it with quiet stoicism and endurance, just like you would do if you lived then or if those conditions returned. Like, we think about how our ancestors lived through the Great Depression or the Great Influenza, or any of these things. And they lived through it by living through it. It's not that complicated. Just in the same way that you lived through the pandemic by, as Marcus Aurelius says, by using the weapons that you've always been armed with, your reason, your strength, your power of will. And so that's how you have to think about it. Like, you're not that different from them. And in fact, we're all descendants of people who have been through much worse stuff. We come from an unbroken line of survivors, dating back to Marcus Aurelius and before him, and before her, and before him, all the way back. We come from an unbroken line of survivors. And as I look out over this town, I just take some edification from the hardiness and the perseverance and the strength of the people who lived here. And you can choose to do that too. And it's just, I think, something always worth remembering. The Stoics say, like, all of this is ours in trust only. Like, you possess it briefly, however long you have it. But like, undoubtedly, it goes with your death. It goes to someone else. But it can also be stolen from you. It can burn down like it did earlier this year. Like, it's yours in trust. You have so little control over it. And we're basically just reacting to these forces outside of our control. Whether you live to be 100, whether there's one pandemic, whether there's 10 pandemics, whether there's natural disasters or whatever, like, you don't own any of this. Like, I heard someone say about their ranch, which I think about with mine, they're like, I don't own this, the bank just lets me make payments on it. I mean, you don't own it. If you don't pay your property taxes, like, someone will come take it from you. Like, you do not own anything. And there's a story about Epictetus where this lamp he has is stolen, and he instead of being upset, he just goes like, you can only lose what you have. And when you feel possessive of things as opposed to seeing them as ephemerally yours, that's where you get those feelings of anger and resentment, because you lied to yourself. You told yourself it was yours. When we feel like stuff's ours, when we feel like we own it, we're more vulnerable than a person who, again, sees these things as only temporarily theirs, which is, I think, another important Stoic exercise. Marcus Aurelius actually says, like, and he gets this from Epictetus, he says, as you tuck your children in tonight, like, say to yourself, like, I might not see them in the morning, which feels like horrible to do. You would never, like, look at something you love and own, let alone a person, and be like, well, like, goodbye. But when you do that, the Stoics say, when you wake up the next day, you're like, you actually appreciate it. You see it as yours. You're grateful for it in a way that if you have begun to take it for granted, or like you've woken up with so many mornings, every morning you have it, you don't appreciate it. You don't see it with the precariousness that it actually exists in. everyone has a thing they would like to do, and then they look at the numbers, or they get dissuaded, or they look at the entrenched interests that would make that very difficult, and then they come up with a reason not to do it.
Yes.
There's this great story where Jeff Bezos has the idea for Amazon, and he's telling his boss, he's working on Wall Street, and they go for this walk in Central Park, and his boss says, "That sounds like a great idea for someone who doesn't have a job," meaning like somebody else should do it, not you. And I do think one of the big elements of courage is this idea of like, if not me, then who, right? Like why would I just let someone else do it? I want to try it. Why shouldn't I risk it?
Yeah, I think like to your point, like instead of finding ways not to do it, find ways or find reasons to do it, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And I think it's obviously a balancing act, but at the end of the day, for me, when I'm thinking about Cerro Gordo specifically, there's no manual for restoring abandoned ghost towns. There's no degree in turning a ghost town into something. And so like to your point, if not me, then who? I think that like, I don't have all of the tools necessary, but I have the confidence that I could figure it out. And so if I'm not going to do it, who else?
It's not just if not me, then who? It's also if not now, then when? And I found that in my career, it's like, okay, yeah, I could wait another year and then go do this stuff in Hollywood, but I probably would have never done it. Then I had this corporate life and it was like, but I want to be a writer. And then to leave that, it's like, if I'm not going to do it now at this age, I'm never going to do it. And then to pivot from that stuff to ancient philosophy, it's like, if you're not going to do it now, you're probably never going to do it. And so there's this great Latin expression, foxy focus, basically like, do it if you're going to do it. Like, you can't put it off. You can't tell yourself like, when I'm more established, when it's safer, when it's more proven, because that's when you miss your moment. Epictetus said that philosophy wasn't this dry, abstract thing. It was a thing, he said, you should be talking about, writing down, reading about, exploring with other people all the time. He said, constantly have it at hand. That's how I think about philosophy. And it's weird. For the last 5 years, every single day, I've been writing this free email about Stoic philosophy. It's been not just cool to meet all these fellow practitioners of Stoic philosophy, but in writing about it, talking about it, reading it for our podcast, I have got to internalize these ideas in a way that I never would have been able to under any other circumstances. That's the idea. Philosophy is something we're supposed to engage in, not keep in these dusty old books or read once and be done with. It's a constant process. And I think that's why the email has worked so well for the people reading about it and sharing it and talking about it, all of that as well. So I'd love to have you join us on this email. You can sign up at dailystoic.com/daily email. It's totally free, no spam. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. I've basically given away a book for free every single year for 5 years, and I'm gonna keep on doing it until I drop dead. Check it out, dailystoic.com/daily email.